Hey, Andrea, can you tell me the target states again? North Carolina, Georgia, Alabama.
Texas, Arizona.
Yep.
So a lot of your states and some that are not.
Mhm.
All right, the live stream, we are recording and the live stream is setting up right now.
Okay, we're almost at 200.
All right.
201. Okay, we're moving.
We are moving.
Cooking with solar.
All righty. And
okay, folks are asking about whether or not the recording will be available.
yes, the recording will be available on our oops. The recording will be available on our Facebook page. Well, they'll be available on our Facebook page because we're streaming live, and it will also be available on our YouTube channel. So, all right, we are live. So people getting to see a little more about the back end of Zoom than they probably wanted. All right. Yep. We are live on Facebook. So I'm going to say this is great. And let's get a little housekeeping done. All right, there, this will cut down on all of our background noise. And I will welcome everybody officially. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so very much for joining us today for our COVID-19 and the 2020 election summit. This election is going to be an election like no other election we have ever seen in the history of the United States. We are in the middle of a pandemic, which seems to be getting worse and not better. There are attempts in many states to open the states, thereby spreading and hastening the spread of the disease. There is inadequate health care in virtually all rural communities and in many cities that will be impacted. The great state of Georgia is having their presidential and congressional primary elections on June 9th. And this is the situation where we find ourselves literally 5 months before the 2020 federal elections, where we will be electing a president and the United States Congress. So thank you very, very much for joining us. Let me go and grab my PowerPoint again so that I can walk you through what we're going to be doing today. I'm Andrea Miller, and I want to dedicate this summit to the memory of my late sister, Elaine. I don't think anybody on this call today knew my sister, Elaine. Not only was she my baby sister, she also worked for the Center for Common Ground. And she had been one of our phone bankers since 2016, when we didn't even know we were going to be the Center for Common Ground. As you can see from this slide, she died on May 14th. The month that she died, her daughters had bought her a new computer and they bought her a new phone. And 2 days before she died, she was worrying about when she could get back on the phone to call her voters. So, Elaine, all of this for the rest of 2020 will be for you. Now, about the organization and the work we need to do. Center for Common Ground, as a lot of you know, is a 501c3 in Virginia. Our mission is very simple. We are here to empower underrepresented voters. We will be working and talking to you today predominantly about our Reclaim Our Vote campaign. So in addition to working on ensuring that underrepresented voters are going to be able to vote, we are also a technology company inventing technology that helps us help underrepresented voters vote. I'm going to have a special quick thank you to our board of directors. I'm the founding board member, so yes, all of this is my fault. Reverend Rodney, thank you so very much for all that you do. Phil Thompson, Jesse Frierson, Gabby, thank you so much. This summit was your brainchild. Bernard in Alabama, Deepak, Pamela, and Katie Hornup. Now, states where we are working, you may have heard Cliff ask, we are working in the great state of Texas, Mississippi, Alabama, North Carolina, Arizona, and Georgia. So yes, we picked the easy states, but these are states where the voting population is more than 20% community of color. So this is where we are focused. A quick word about what we have done. So far in 2020, we've made 109,000 phone calls. And I love this number. We've sent 1.3 million postcards into our target states. And I really want you to have a moment to take a look at our postcards. We are writing to voters who have been suppressed, who have been oppressed, and we are telling them, vote your power. We are voting for our lives and power to the people, and this is how we take it back. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Gabby. Gabby, unmute.
Sorry.
I got you.
Oh, you got me? Okay, thank you. So I was just thanking all of you, so I'll thank you again. Welcome. Welcome to the launch of the Center for Common Ground's Reclaim Our Vote Virtual Grassroots Summit Series. We're so honored to have you join us for today's important discussion about strengthening democracy in difficult times. When we first envisioned the summit 2 months ago, we were still in the early throes of COVID-19. With alarm, we watched how quickly the infection numbers and deaths were adding up. The focus at that time was mostly by coastal Washington and California, New York, New Jersey, and Massachusetts. When we started, primaries were just really getting into full swing, and it was clear that voting in person was going to be problematic. State after state began re-examining their processes. Some states like mine in Maryland simply delayed primaries and opted to send ballots in the mail, but some like Wisconsin pushed forward, forcing people to go to the polls in person, standing in long lines, and many became ill, as we've heard throughout the media. So we fast forward to today and the situation we find ourselves in, which is over 100,000 dead. The economy is basically tanked, with the exception of the stock market to a certain extent. Unemployment is through the roof. Sadly, I'm sure soon we will begin to witness displacement as people lose their homes. To move the economy along, states are now reopening, but there's little guidance on the most appropriate way to do so. There are still no widely available tests, and there are discrepancies in the tests that are available. PPE is still lacking in many hospitals, and since reopening started, there are now new hotspots in places where we're working, like North Carolina, Alabama, Georgia, Virginia, Iowa, Wisconsin, Arkansas, and even in select spaces in California, like Sonoma Valley. Basically, what we're seeing is that rural areas and smaller metropolises are being hit very hard now. Now, we know those are also the areas, as Andrea mentioned, that have less access to really high quality healthcare, if any. Racism has also sprung out of the closet. In the last few weeks, we have witnessed 3 horrible and needless murders: Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd. Say their names. Because of their deaths and how they were handled by authorities, last night, the country exploded. There were riots and protests in 28 cities across the country from the last estimate that I saw. So basically what we're seeing is that our people's nerves are fraying. To quote Martin Luther King, riots do not develop out of thin air. What he knew and what we're seeing today is that as long as America postpones justice, we stand in the condition of having these riots over and over again. And these conditions, as he said, must be condemned as rigorously as the riots. What that tells us is that social justice and full, meaningful enfranchisement equals riot prevention. We also know, and I don't know how you're going to feel about this statement, but that when something is burned down or destroyed, we will build it again. Something will replace it. So the question to you is, what will we fill it with? How do we turn this terrible moment in our history into an opportunity for a better democracy, a stronger, more just and equitable society? As a nation, I think we need a do-over. And the only way we're going to get that is via this election. And that's why we're doing this today, to ensure that the process is free and fair. So today, we will discuss the what. What is happening? What do we need to understand in this bigger picture? And tomorrow we will discuss the how. And we will try to answer the hard questions. Can we as citizens stand up and fight back? And even the bigger question, which is really the basis of this summit, how do we reclaim our vote to strengthen our democracy? So thank you. And with this hopeful note, I didn't know.
Sister Simone, welcome.
Thank you. I'm Sister Simone Campbell. I'm the Executive Director of Network Lobby for Catholic Social Justice, and it's such an honor to be with you folks across the country. It was great hearing you check in and wanting to say hi to each other and connect. This is a time of urgency, as Gabby and Andrea have pointed out. It's an urgency that, in my many years, I don't think I've ever seen anything this much of a crisis. I prepared my talk last week. What a mistake. Because in a few short days, we have so much to add to why this election matters. This election matters because not only do we have a lack of leadership in so many places, especially in the key states that you pointed out, Andrea, that you folks are working in. We have a lack of leadership, yes, but we also have leadership in the wrong direction. When leadership in the White House is proposing more violence, when leadership in the White House is promoting racist responses, when leadership in the White House is undermining our global consensus that we're all in this together and withdrawing us from the World Health Organization in a fit of pique, that is a challenge not only to our nation, but it's a challenge to world stability. So this election becomes an election that is not just about you and me. It's not just about the various us of our nation, but it becomes about the very fragile relationships that we have in the globe. And who are we as a nation in that process? Now, you have all, or many of you have been doing these phone calls. Thank you. Congratulations. Fabulous. Many of you have been engaged in your postcard writing. I love that number, 1.3 million. How fabulous. But what I want to say to everybody on the call is we all have a part to play. We all are the leaders we have been waiting for, and we can each do our part. And in that jigsaw puzzle of engagement, we can make something new happen. So that when the results are announced on November 4th, we will have people who have participated, who have engaged, who have entered into the important democratic conversation of where are we going? What are we going to be rebuilding from the ashes? How are we going to move forward as a community in this really vibrant, fragile time? And so I believe looking at the efforts to engage people in the election are as critical as our early founding fathers and mothers who engaged in our original Declaration of Independence, in our original creation of a Constitution, in our original creation of the Bill of Rights. We need to reform this union in a way that changes the discrimination that was in our roots, but moves us to a total engagement of our entire nation, including our immigrants, including every race, creed, color. That is the amazing thing, that democracy has room for everyone if we move away from our fear, move away from that sense of individualism, and move towards the fact that we're community. But let me tell you a story about someone I met in the 2016 election cycle who taught me something powerful. We were in Indianapolis, and I was speaking to a GED class. That's folks getting their high school equivalency. They were all adults. They had families and different stories. There were about 25 of them. And I got them talking about what they were worried about in this election cycle. And they were worried about, you probably will guess it, wages and housing, because Indianapolis was gentrifying and they were getting pushed out of their rental housing. So we talked about it. And then our organization, Network, as part of our toolkit, had created side-by-sides comparing the positions of Secretary Clinton and then Donald Trump. 2 90-second side-by-sides. I show them. And Thomasina, a mom of 2, probably in her late 20s, said, blurted out, just blurted out, I wasn't going to vote. I was afraid I would hurt our country, but now I can vote. And I was like, you were afraid you would hurt our country? Well, it turns out all she knew were the negative ads on television. And she was not connected politically the way we are. She wasn't engaged in turning out the vote. She was a mom who wanted to care for her kids and do the best thing for her nation. Because she couldn't decide between negative ads, which is the purpose of negative ads, is she decided that her moral responsibility was to not vote. But with just a teeny bit of information, she felt she could vote. She could make the moral choice. She could move forward. And as I reflected on that story, preparing for this talk, isn't that the role that many of you play? You become the trusted, important, valued validators of how do you choose? How do you make a decision? How can you move forward? And then help people engage in the electoral process. We need you to be missionaries that spread the truth. What a shock. To spread the reality, but in one-on-one conversations, either in your, with neighbors, on the phone, through the postcards, whatever you do, we need to make sure that data and information and engagement goes on. There are too many Thomasinas out there who don't know how to decide, but you hold the key. So my friends, let us commit to making sure that this election includes the 100%. This election, make sure that everyone's registered and prepared to vote. This election, we will not be put off by negative ads and all the efforts to suppress the vote and let the seeds of racism spread up. No, we're going to root out those weeds. We're going to change it. And together, 2020 will be the moment where we begin to rebuild something that is inclusive, faithful, and part of the whole. Thank you. Thanks for this opportunity. I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much, Sister Simone, for those incredible words of wisdom, of hope, and inspiration that no matter who we are, we all have a part to play, and there is something that each and every one of us can do. Making a phone call, writing a postcard, and if our handwriting is so bad that we can't read it ourselves, then maybe putting the stamps on for the person who is writing the postcards. Thank you. Thank you. I'm getting even more excited about the rest of today. What I'd like to do now is I'm going to grab the spotlight, and what I'd like to do now is introduce our panel, because we do have an exciting group of panelists who are going to be with us today. On our panel, we have Vanessa Gonzalez from the Leadership Conference of Civil and Human Rights. We have our partners at Black Voters Matter, Cliff Albright, and Bill Spriggs, our partner in labor, our partner in helping us understand what is going on economically, and will that play a role in the 2020 elections. What we're going to do now is we are going to introduce you to each one of our panelists individually, and then after all three of our panelists have done their introduction, we will have a Q&A. So with that, let me bring up Vanessa. So Vanessa, welcome, 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 and thank you so much for joining us.
Of course. Thank you so much, Andrea. I want you to run all of my Zoom calls. You're fantastic at it, so thank you so much. And thank you. It is an honor to speak right after the amazing Sister Simone, who I said I have admired for many years. So thank you all so much for allowing me to be here, and particularly Center for Common Ground. Extremely humbled and proud to be here to represent the Center for the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. For those of you who don't know us, we are an organization, a convening body of over 220 organizations across the country, national and state-based, who focus and center people of communities of impact, people of color, indigenous nations in the center of our work, and then work on civil rights. We were founded in 1950, and we have been involved in every single civil rights reform, whether it's on the Hill or whether it's in the streets, since our founding. So again, we're really excited to jump into this talk. I'm excited to be here today because we have a couple of different programs that we are particularly running when it comes to voting. We have one that is All Voting is Local, which again speaks that we all have an opportunity to participate. We all have an opportunity to be organizers and advocates. You all are here, you know that, you are those people. And that can vary depending upon whether or not you're marching, whether or not you're adding a stamp to a postcard. There's a world of things that you can do, and everyone is welcome. And then we also have our And Still I Vote campaign, which is geared towards maybe some younger folks, with the idea being that no matter what is coming at us, we will vote. And still I vote. You can hurt us, you can push us, you can try voter suppression efforts. We will still vote, and we will still show up. I want to preface all that to say, though, that in recent days, and acknowledge the hurt and the pain of our Black brothers and sisters across the country and across the world who are experiencing, once again, another chapter of systemic racism and being put upon again. And so I want to just speak to that and make sure that we all recognize that in this conversation, voting is not necessarily the magic wand. Things will not be perfect the day after the election. We will put all of our effort, our blood, soul, and tears into it. We will march, we will figure out how to do this in a digital space and over social media and engage as many people as we can. But that next day, that doesn't mean that the work ends. There's been generations and centuries of harm done, particularly to people of color, particularly to our Black brothers and sisters, our Indigenous people and immigrants throughout this country. And so it is on us to get everybody registered to vote, to get them to the polls, to get them engaged, and then the work begins. We're looking at how do laws really impact for the long term, right? What is the structural changes that need to happen? And that comes from local district attorney races all the way to senators who are charged with appointing judges onto the Supreme Court who do not listen to us and do not hold our values. And so when I say that there is a world of opportunity for all of us to engage, I really mean it. But I want to make sure that we all come into this in partnership with the idea that we're going to continue that fire and we're going to continue pushing throughout and past Election Day. So thank you again. I'm really excited to highlight some of the work that the Leadership Conference is doing in conjunction with many national partners and state and local folks on the ground. So thank you again.
Thank you, Vanessa. I had the incredible opportunity of working with Vanessa and the Leadership Conference through Social Movement Technologies. I sit on their board, and I also periodically get an opportunity to do training for local and regional organizations. And what a delight to see an organization in DC reaching out, reaching back, and helping empower community organizations to really begin building that local power. So again, thank you and the Leadership Conference for all that you do. Thank you so very much. Now, I get to bring on a partner, someone whom I had an opportunity to meet right at the end of the 2017 elections in Alabama, when Cliff Albright and Black Voters Matter discovered that our group was in the air. We were the folks on the phones, and Cliff had an organization of people on the ground in the Alabama Black Belt, knocking on doors and turning out the vote. And when we realized we both had a passion for our people, and not only a passion, we both brought organizational tools and specializations to that work. It was a partnership made in heaven. So Cliff, I am so delighted to have you join us this afternoon. Mr. Cliff Albright, Black Voters Matter Fund. Cliff.
Thank you, Andrea. I'm always so excited to be able to share space with you and of course with the rest of this great panel who are all doing such amazing work. I wish that I could be here and sharing the space with you all under different circumstances. We all know the events that have been taking place this week, and really the events that have been taking place since the founding of this country, but in particular the events that have been taking place this week, and the toll that it's had on all of us and the toll that it's having on our communities. It has multiplied exponentially the trauma which our folks are facing, and that includes the very activists that are having to organize around these issues, and the activists that are going to have to organize around this vote that we're talking about, around these elections. And so, and it's impacted all of you. So I just want to lift that up and recognize all of you for the roles that you all are playing in these times that are in. I mentioned that, and I agree with, as was mentioned earlier, we need to say their names: George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery, and so many others. I mentioned that, one, just to recognize the context, right? The space that we're in right now, but also to raise that in terms of this topic, right? Reclaiming our vote and the work that we have to do in the coronavirus context. And so that's part of the work, that as we do our outreach, as we do our postcarding, as we're doing our phone banking, that we've got to recognize the time that we're in. One of the things that we heard from our partners who were in Wisconsin, who were doing mobilization during their election last month, was that, you know, some candidates and some parties and some organizations really turned people off by doing the regular phone calls or the regular text messages that didn't in any way recognize the context, didn't recognize the time that we're in and the pain that people are going through with coronavirus. And so, my first message is that we've got to do a much better job across the board of recognizing that, of recognizing the context of the current police violence crisis that we're under, right? That virus, but also the context of coronavirus. And so my word to everybody is, even if it's just a sentence, in everything we do, we've got to recognize the context. We can't act like this is just another regular election cycle and not recognize what folks are going through. The second thing that I think we have to recognize as we do our messaging, and we're seeing this in Georgia right now. We've got an election in a week and a half, Pennsylvania, where we just did a town hall just this week, where they've got an election coming up, South Carolina. One of the things that we've got to recognize is that there's this concerted intimidation effort that's taking place. We know about 45 and his tweets and his messages and his press conferences talking about voter fraud, right? But what we also know is that there's I think it's a $20 million effort by the Republican Party, effort that's being pushed by the Trump campaign, and an effort that's being supported within some of these states and some of the very states that we're talking about here. States like Georgia, where the Secretary of State has created a so-called voter fraud task force. And that's being replicated in other states. And so we've got to recognize that although a lot of the voters that we're trying to reach, we discount what Trump is talking about, what 45 is talking about. But when it's layered with the fact that your Secretary of State or your governor has launched a panel, that there are investigators that are going around in cities and counties, and particularly in rural counties where folks are isolated, that you have investigators going around trying to look for so-called voter fraud. We've got to address that in our messaging, right? We've got to address that in everything that we do so that we're dealing with the intimidation, we're giving folks accurate information, we're letting them know the different resources that they have in order to deal with that intimidation. And so that's the second thing that we're seeing as we're doing our work in the various states. And the third piece that I'll just touch on, the third and last piece is, and it's very much related to that second one, is that we've got to do a great job of informing folks about this process, about this vote by mail process, which is different in all of these states, and which has all kinds of pitfalls. Here in Georgia, we are actually suing the Secretary of State over the postage issue, calling it a poll tax because they sent out ballots and ballot applications without return postage guaranteed. And so we've got to get information to folks about what do they do if they don't have enough postage. What are the requirements? The U.S. Post Office says that you can mail it, and the states or the counties are saying something different. And so we just have to, as I close out, we just have to make sure that as we're communicating by postcard, phone, and otherwise, that we're communicating what the process is in order to make sure folks are very clear about each of those steps. We're requesting the ballot, sending the actual ballot back in, and then what to do if they have to actually show up at the polling place.
Thanks so much, Cliff. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We're now going to bring up our next panelist, William Spriggs, who's the chief economist at the AFL-CIO. So we want to get a perspective on jobs, the economy, and that very special perspective that labor brings. So Bill, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and I really appreciate the honor of having been invited and included in the conversation. The other panelists are fantastic, and it was so wonderful to hear the words from the sister to launch us into this conversation. I want to echo her thoughts because it's at this time that it's very easy to sink into cynicism and to lose faith and to decide to be the victim. It's easy to decide that we can't change anything, and therefore let's not participate. I want us to remember, don't play the victim. This is the time to fight back. This is the time to rearm yourself and say no. This is the time to find that inner strength and say never again. And it doesn't help to be a cynic and to denigrate the efforts of those who have gone before us, who have faced this same struggle, and to act as if they never fought or never did anything. Behind me, you see this flag. It's one of the 3 flags in my house representing my family's effort to fight for democracy. And so I don't want us to act like we've never fought. Here's the situation we're in. I know you have been told many times, this is the most important election. Well, the reality is each one of those was, because we are where we are because those elections went the wrong way. And now we are where Black people have always been the prophets to America. We tried to tell you. That's our prophetic message to this nation. Here's where we are. This is not only a crisis in terms of health, it's a super crisis in terms of our economy. So the irony of the situation is this. So often we look inward in communities of color when there are economic downturns, because in normal economic times, we don't enjoy the fruit of economic recoveries in the same way that other communities have. And we get the sense that it doesn't matter what I do, we end up at the bottom, and it's planned that way. And there's often the tendency to believe that if there is a downturn, it was designed to push us back down. The reality is economic downturns are like bombs. They drop, they destroy the economy for everyone. And this time, it actually hurt white men more. The unemployment rate for white men went up dramatically more than in the past. So that while it is horrible that Black men face an unemployment rate of 16.7%, that is not the worst unemployment rate Black men have faced. The recession of 1980 that Paul Volcker gave this nation was the worst Black men ever faced. The recession that we call the Great Recession was worse than this for Black men. White men have never, ever, ever had double-digit unemployment, ever. So the fact that this economy collapsed, this isn't just about us. And the scary part, the part that should frighten you, is that this failure to take control of our economy has resulted in the worst labor market white men have ever faced. And yet, this president still has a 46% approval rate. If that doesn't frighten you, I mean, come to grasp with, yes, in the past, you could imagine that some people were fooling themselves that when we had these other recessions and their unemployment rate went up, they were fooling themselves that, yeah, but somehow or another, I can still believe what I want to believe. But in this situation, the objective reality is this man messed up worse than anybody in history. Anybody. And yet he can still command their allegiance. This means they're fighting for something else. They're not rational, as economists would consider someone rational. They're not voting for their economic interest. Now, the part of the labor movement is to continue to educate people so that they vote for their economic interest and drop everything else. So part of it is us understanding the moment of danger that we are in, because as much as people want to talk about the burning of the 3rd precinct in Minneapolis and call that a riot, when armed people took over the state capital of Michigan and forced it to stop operating, that's a riot. Just because the police decided they weren't going to intervene, just because the state troopers decided they weren't going to do anything about armed people taking over a state capital, that doesn't mean it wasn't a riot. That means it was a riot and everybody just waved their hands. But that was a riot. And that's the fear that we must understand is the moment we're in, rather than respond to the reality of having been lied to, cheated, and robbed in this economy. We saw their anger vented at legitimate government. This is the threat we face. It is the threat to democracy, that we will retreat from the voice of the people. It is our responsibility to once again save America, to save it for democracy, to save it for what it can be, and not to give in to someone else's narrative as the final say on what America can be. Do not be cynical and say, oh, well, America was always that way, so it will always be that way. That's giving someone a vision and letting them claim the victory. They lost the Civil War. Understand that. They lost the Civil War. Thousands of Black men removed from slavery by 1 year, 2 years, and some of them still enslaved, joined and beat them and changed this country to give a different vision for this nation. Don't let them down. Don't act like they didn't do that. Don't let them act like you didn't beat them. We won. Don't rewrite history as if they won and their vision was the only vision. Our vision won, and our vision was a legitimate vision for this nation going forward. Don't get cynical and say theirs is the only vision and theirs ultimately always wins. Don't be the victim. The crisis we face, ironically, is that they are so twisted, and the story has been so twisted about what's going on with the virus. You have repeatedly heard about comorbidity factors explain why Black people are dying from the virus. Black people are inferior because they get diabetes, they're obese, and they have asthma and lung problems. That is not why we're dying. That is not why we're dying from this virus. We are dying from this virus because we are workers. We are dying from this virus because we are disproportionately healthcare workers. We are disproportionately public transit drivers. We are disproportionately grocery store clerks. We are disproportionately the workers who are on the front line exposed to the virus more than anyone else, and we don't get to telework. Our work is with the people. Now, this is why this is the irony. Maybe you remember in the film Raiders of the Lost Ark, when the Harrison Ford character is in a battle with some Nazi thugs who are looking for this amulet, and one of them has him down, has Harrison Ford's character down, right? Indiana is down. And the Nazi guy says, shoot them both. In other words, if I have to kill you to kill him, that's okay. I don't care. That's what white workers are facing right now. Disproportionately, we are healthcare workers, but they're willing to sacrifice white healthcare workers too. Disproportionately, we drive buses, but we're not the only ones who drive buses, but they're willing to kill them too. Disproportionately, we work as grocery store clerks. They're willing to kill the white people grocery store clerks too. White people are not invincible in this disease. They die, they just don't get it as often. That's the difference. The way we have constructed the view of this economy and the outcome that we're going through is to disguise the failure of leadership to address the economic calamity we're facing right now. We must protect the democracy to come out of this. We must restore real leadership, and we must restore a faith and a belief in a battle that goes on and on and on, and it's not going to stop, and it's not going to stop just because you want to give up. So please, the work you are doing to encourage people to have the courage, the work you are doing to get people to feel empowered, the work that you are doing to get people to go out and vote, the work that you're doing to get people to continue the fight is so exceedingly vital in this moment, because these two crises of health and economy are not going to solve themselves. And you are the captains of the fight to get people to charge that hill, to make America be what it can be and not fall into that cynicism.
Thank you, Bill. All right, now, wasn't that, I am very excited, a tremendous panel. We are now going to ask the panelists questions. I've got two very generic questions for the panelists because we've got organizers and we have policy people, but again, I look at labor as labor folks are organizers. So the first question is, what are our organizing opportunities in this horrific, bizarre framework where we find ourselves? And question number two, and Cliff brought that up when he was speaking, messaging. How do we want to talk to people? What do we want to say when we go out and we are approaching them about this fight for literally democracy as we know it in 2020? So I'm going to move that over to Cliff. I'm going to direct this a little bit. So Cliff.
Yeah, I guess I'll take the second one on the messaging. Yeah, I mean, I think that two things, and I guess they're related to messaging and opportunities. I think that this is an opportunity for us to reframe some of the conversations that people are having on these issues, or just conversations people are having on what's going on around us and what the possibilities are. So for example, you know, even reframing the discussions taking place around the so-called looting of what we've seen the past couple of days. And I just did a post about this on Facebook just this morning, you know, putting it in the context of there's looting that goes on every day. You know, there's billionaires looting every day. Billionaires have multiplied the regular looting during this coronavirus crisis to the tunes of hundreds of billions of dollars. That's looting. And that's no less violent than what we're seeing in the streets, right? Because that kind of looting has real life violence in people's lives. And so just reframing even the discussions around, you know, around the policies of healthcare or whatever it is, and all these, you know, months ago, the questions were, oh, how are you going to do something like universal healthcare, right? And so, but overnight they came up with trillions of dollars, and so for the crisis and for companies during this crisis, and so changing. So the opportunity is that I think people are seeing that some of the things that they try to tell us aren't possible really are possible. And so we've got to find ways. Now it's hard with some of the mechanisms that we have, you know, outside the context of door to door, but just trying to do it in postcards and tweets and phone banking. But we've got to find a way to use whatever conversations we have to reframe some of these discussions around what's possible and what's taking place and where the root causes are. And if we can do that, that'll connect it to the elections and motivate people to participate in the types of numbers that we need them to.
Thanks, Cliff. I know when we designed our postcards, never, ever, ever did we believe there would be so much relevance in vote for our lives. We just didn't really see it. I'm going to call on you, Vanessa. Same two questions. What are our organizing opportunities, and what messaging can we use?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the organizing opportunities, I know me and my colleagues in different movement spaces and in different organizations for a period of time felt a little bit frozen because we had all planned to activate and door knock and really get out. I had planned a giant travel itinerary for myself, right, to go into the States and meet with people. And so for a bit, it felt like we were just stopped. And as people who live every day to do this work, it also was, it took a lot of us to take a moment back and take a step back. So what we've identified is, one, people really have to understand that organizers are everyone who speaks to another person about being involved. You don't have to be an organizer. There's not like a gold star after you knock 1,000 doors, right? If you are able to talk to your congregation, if you are able to move people within your family, if you're able to encourage people to fill out the census, you are helping organize communities. We have moved a lot of the work in the civil rights space to a digital platform because we have to. Thankfully, though, we have a lot of young folks, which I am not including myself in that, who are very tech savvy and social media savvy. What we've been able to do is engage a lot of voters via text messages. So if you've gotten a text message from us, I hope you accepted it, number one. But what we found is, because particularly people of color and Latinos over-index on their phones, and I think with children being homeschooled, we're seeing an even exacerbated level of the digital divide, right? We know a lot of kids are home working and doing their homework on their parents' cell phones because that's all they have. So we know that that stat runs true. And so we are trying to lean into that and use it as an opportunity for people to feel their power by text messaging, by sending out something, very quickly that they can respond to. And we're not using the power of text messaging and social media to just push out messages. We're pushing out education opportunities where people can vote, what they can engage in for the moment. I think we want to make it as easy as possible because someone said earlier, within the context of where we are right now, we can't ask people to continue up this ladder of engagement, as we talk about in organizing, and not feel like every single text, every single conversation is worth something, because it very much is. And so when we're out texting people, when we're out sending messages to people, we are able to say, here are the things that you need to push your local election officials for, even in this moment. What we saw in Wisconsin was a disgrace. And it was intentional, right? And so what we are asking folks to do is, however you can email, however you can call, even fax, because that will really stand out these days, your local elected officials all the way to your Senate, please do that. And I think the onus is on us, for those of us who have the privilege and luxury to be able to work from home, to still be able to work in movements and provide the mechanisms and tools so that folks can do that very easily as they're rushing between either jobs or trying to tend to their caretaker duties as well. And so it is not easy. It does take some resources. We are all trying our best, but I think so long as we continue to move that forward, we see that there is still opportunity even in this space. In terms of messaging, what we're doing, again, for All Voting is Local, is really making it local. We are looking at what are the systemic issues at the local level that we need to start addressing and breaking down. And when I mean breaking down, it means breaking down into little blocks. So everything seems doable. Do we need folks to start signing up to be poll workers? Absolutely. We need people to start getting trained on that. We need people to start attending some of these election meetings. We need people to reach out to their city council, right? So we're breaking it down brick by brick so it feels doable to people. Because right now, so many of our people just feel so overwhelmed. We want to make sure people understand you can do this, and that's towards the win. For our other program, which is And Still I Vote, it's much more geared towards people who need an outlet for the energy that is building and want to be able to say systemic change has to happen now. And to the point that this is obviously, again, the most important election, and that there are always people who need to come out to vote. You know, for the Latino community in particular, they always call us a sleeping giant. We've been sleeping forever, apparently. And we wake up every 4 years and then we go back to bed, is the way it makes it sound. But this is an opportunity to really push the systemic issues of our voting structure and make sure that we're chipping away at those as well. So it's a little bit different than just throwing, everybody has to vote. It's like, no, how do we make these changes in a way that feels doable to people?
Excellent. Thank you so very much, Vanessa. I'm going to go to Sister Simone Campbell because Network is a faith organization. So what are you doing as a faith organization? We're not all used to thinking of, I am, but everyone isn't, of thinking of faith organizations and elections in the same sentence.
Well, I hope we're going to remedy that reality, Andrea, because for us, faith is a care about a community. And in my Christian tradition, it's all about Jesus convening community. You know, there's a story about the multiplication of the loaves and fish. Well, Jesus had, it says in the scripture, Jesus had people sit down in groups of 50 because they know we needed to work in workable, he knew we needed to work in workable groupings. So what we're doing is with our interreligious task force in Washington, D.C., we have a national reach. We're working on a project called Faithful Democracy. Faithful democracy is both faithful to democracy, but it also embodies our interfaith truths, which all of our faiths include that awareness of the fact that we're community together. So up on our website, networklobby.org, what we have is an election toolkit. And it has a whole slew of opportunities for people to get engaged. And then we're working in specific states with teams to get engaged in that way. And some of the tools that haven't been mentioned yet are letters to the editor. It's a great opportunity to stir things up if you have either an online or still have a print newspaper in your community. It's a great way to get it out, get others to be missionaries for the common good. I mean, that's what we're advocating. Another way is through other newsletters. Churches often have newsletters. Reach out to your church and see if you can put something in about voting or about recruiting people to help you reach out to others to make sure they're registered and engaged. These are all really good, acceptable, nonpartisan engagement. And then for some of us, we stray over to the partisan side too, but I won't talk about that here, but you can check it out, what we're up to. You can work on the partisan side, but we need a lot of people working on the nonpartisan side, and that is perfect for faith communities because we know the benefit of community, we know how to reach out to each other. Now, in terms of messaging, because we know community, in addition to what Cliff and Vanessa were saying, I would just add one other thing. Often in your conversations, it's not so important what you say, but it's how you listen to people who feel so disenfranchised, so angry, so left out, so marginalized, that we've discovered that if we listen, it frees people up to be able then to think of the others if they feel they've been seen. In 2019, we did a series of our organization Network did a series of roundtables around the country in rural communities, because so much of the support for the status quo, for the dysfunction of now, is not because of policy, it's because of anger and feeling left out or dismissed. And I believe one of the critical things we can do is to listen with respect to folks who feel marginalized in this time and help them see how we're counting on them. You matter to me. I'll have your back. Will you have mine? Let's be in this together. Let's make it happen. But the first step is listening. And that listening then builds the bridge to making that future together. Because if we don't listen, if we don't learn, if we don't have an awareness, people are going to continue to be turned off, pushed out, and it's going to be too much work. And we're not going to be able to claim we the people. So that's the number one. And finally, in terms of messaging, I think the most critical thing about messaging is speaking from your heart. Speak what matters to you. And if you say, if something brings tears to your eyes, there's a good message to go with. What matters so much that it touches your heart, not your head. We can do all the academic stuff, but in our conversations with our neighbors, we need the academic, but let it sink down to our heart so that we can then engage with, you know what really matters to me is X. What really matters to me is the consistent discrimination that's going on and throwing people off the rolls. It's so wrong. Just watch the video Suppressed and you'll be horrified. It brought me to tears. Please, let's engage. But see how that works?
Yep.
It's a head thing to the heart, on to the next person. Those are my thoughts. But check out our election toolkit, as well as at networklobby.org, election toolkit, you can see it, as well as our faithful democracy work. We're excited about it. Join us. It'd be cool.
Thank you. And now I'm going to go to Bill. Bill, labor and how are they organizing in the time of COVID? And does labor have a message for us?
Well, we're organizing very hard, and labor is different. People who are in unions are used to fighting. They come to things with a different attitude. And a large part of what we're doing now is to educate around the 5 things that we want, our 5 principles for the election going forward, and making sure that members of the labor movement know those things. But what the labor movement does best is to empower people, to give them the sense that you can do something about this. And so workers already kind of have a sense of talking with each other about what matters. And we talked about those common things that matter as workers. We want to put food on the table. We want safety in our homes. We want our children to be able to do well and to flourish. And we know that that means that our efforts have to be rewarded when we go to work. Other people can have other concerns. The strength of the labor movement is giving sense to people of power, that we are in this together, that there are other people like you who, when we join forces, can make a difference. Unions are so different because people have seen that happen. They see it happen in their everyday life at the workplace, and they know that their union has delivered for them. It's a little harder when you're outside of the union movement to give people that same sense of empowerment. But when you listen to people, you have to figure out, how can I find that same common thread, but then give them a sense that there are other people fighting with you on these matters, and that if you will join with us, that your voice will matter and will be amplified. Workers through unions know that they have a megaphone. That's their power. And we are going to be working very hard in many of the states that you have identified, very hard, because we have enough union members in some of those states to matter. But it is important, when you look at these states where workers are not allowed to unionize, to understand how defeated workers can be, because they have been denied their voice so long at work that they don't understand that they can have a voice. So a lot of your talking with people has to be getting them a sense that not just do you have concerns, not just that you matter, but that you can matter, that you can change things, that you have that power. And I think there's some lessons from how union organizers go about giving workers that sense that has to be incorporated in giving voters that same sense that the boss is an enemy we can beat. And you have to give them that same sense that I can make a difference.
Amen.
Love it, love it, love it. All right, I'm going to thank the panel for their answering the questions that I had. And now I've been watching the chat go wild. I'm going to have my team come on, and what we're going to do is get some questions from the floor. So Nancy, if you will.
Yeah, there was a question for Vanessa earlier, and she covered it again, but she had mentioned the 3 voting initiatives. What are they again?
Yeah, sure. So you can go to allvotingislocal.org. And that is a campaign where we're working in some of the same states you are. And so we have organizers from the communities hired up through the leadership conference and working with different voting and election tables. And in that space, we are working in Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Wisconsin, and Michigan. And then the second one is andstillivote.org. And on there, you can sign up to receive additional information. You can see a couple of videos that our awesome team has put together that helps weave in some of the historical history and voter suppression. That campaign is, just want to reiterate, more about raising awareness about voter suppression tactics, because we feel like there's a ton of groups who do GOTV, and it is absolutely very much needed. But if all of us are registered to vote, we show up that day and are turned away or are told we are not on the rolls, and people don't know what to do, then we have left them in a gap that we could have provided that education on. And so we're really pushing some voter suppression education.
Next question.
Andrea, this is actually a question for you from one of our regional volunteer coordinators. Good point about messaging. How does this fit into our approved scripts by the secretaries of state and attorneys? Are our phone bank scripts also pre-approved for Reclaim Our Vote?
Generally, we start with the postcard script because that is going to be in writing, and that is going to go out to literally thousands of people to write the messages. And then from the postcard scripts, those become the basis for the phone banking scripts, where we understand we are going to be able to have more engagement with the voter. Based on what I've heard today, I guarantee you the phone banking and the text banking scripts, when we really begin texting in earnest, are going to be revised. When we send the attorneys in to talk to the boards of elections, we are really wanting them to be aware of the line. You may no longer be registered to vote. And we want them to know this is what we are saying to people. We are not telling them they aren't registered. We are saying you may no longer be registered, check. In other words, we are putting them on notice that they are going to need to begin doing their jobs, that people are going to be calling them, possibly emailing them. We only give them their phone numbers, but you are going to begin hearing from voters. So your life of long coffee breaks and life is very quiet in the voter registrar's office is about to change. They don't necessarily understand that when we first go in, but normally once the postcards start arriving, they come to that understanding and they're going, ew, why did we say they could say that? It's like, well, you've got to allow us to say something.
There's a very specific question about this COVID time. How do we encourage people to vote by mail who have very real concerns about whether their mail-in ballots will count?
And we have definitely run into that in Georgia. And so many of the voters that we have spoken with on the phone and where we've begun doing texting have come back and said, I've got my absentee ballot, but I'm not putting the thing in the mail. I am going to go and drop it off during early voting. So we are working on suggesting very strongly that people protect their health. And we normally lead with, due to COVID concerns, you can. But what is delighting me with the people in Georgia is one of our speakers said it, Bill did, there is that fight back spirit. People died to go vote. They face people with guns and clubs. I mean, that little COVID-19, putting on my mask, going out, dropping off my ballot. And we saw that in Wisconsin. People said, all right, already, enough. You are not stopping me from voting. I am going.
So someone asked, Vanessa, and maybe you could just put it in the chat, could you enter the states where all voting is local is working in the chat? So that's simple. And a question for Bill Spriggs, Trump's 46% of approval persons are not supporting him for their economic lives. And you would indicate these people aren't rational. So what do you think those people are fighting for?
Well, the ugly reality is it's true. America has always been a conflicted nation. There's always been a series of narratives as to what people want America to be. And we can all point to different symbols that we interpret as, well, that's America. And unfortunately, we fought a civil war over one of those visions. And so we can't erase that as a reality. We can't erase as a reality that some people believe in a different kind of America than we do. That's real, and it's real to them. So they are rational in that sense because they aren't looking at a government of the people, by the people, or for the people. There's a reason why the Gettysburg Address from Lincoln was phrased in that way. There are some Americans who believe in a democracy of the people, by the people, and for the people. There's some who don't. They were willing to fight a great war over that. And so this is the moment when those of us who believe in that government and that vision of America need to give people the confidence that our narrative is an important narrative, that it's not one to be erased, and it's a time to remove a kind of cynicism that can attack that vision so easily, to say, yes, but the other vision is the true America. The Confederacy is not the true America. And there's a reason why they lost. And we have to give people that confidence. We have to hear their concerns. We have to understand their pain. But we have to give them that same confidence that those Black soldiers who stepped out of slavery had to fight and defeat that Confederacy, and the same confidence that those Black sharecroppers and those sons and daughters of sharecroppers had in the 1960s when they said, we're going to take back our vote. We're going to restore the vote that our great-grandparents and grandparents fought for in that Civil War and had us registered to vote in 1865 and took over the governments of the South. Those people in the 1960s faced that same battle with the confidence that they could make a different America. And so I believe that's what we're facing, and that's why this is a dangerous moment, because it, in my view, it couldn't be clearer what the battle is about, because this is not about, oh, they think this man is going to get them jobs. He's destroyed their jobs. He's going to get them higher wages. Wages are sinking dramatically right now. So that's not what they're responding to. They're challenging us. Are we going to respond to defend democracy? And can we empower people? Can we give them the confidence to go on? If you want to join the fight, there's an easy way. We've been sending it in the chat room. The AFL-CIO has a caravan that we're doing around the nation, and it's going to come here to the Capitol on June 3rd. And we've shared through the chat room how people can join. You click the link and you can find part of the caravan to join and get a chance to raise your voices now. But please don't lose sight of the vote that we have to encourage people to take in November.
Amen.
Amen.
All right, and we've got time for one more question, if there is one.
It's kind of for you, Andrea, I think. Could you clarify that the post office is delivering election related materials even if they don't have stamps?
Yes, I had a friend who contacted the American Postal Workers Union, and his explanation to me is that the Postal Service works directly with boards of elections to be able to identify and recognize elections materials. One of the big things we're seeing at the same time that there's a huge push to do vote by mail is the attempt to destroy the Postal Service, literally now from the inside, not only financially, but from the inside, to get at policies like this, where the Postal Service, a semi or a quasi-governmental agency that operates in all 50 states, is very supportive of democracy, democratic ideals, and the tools of democracy. There is a huge move afoot to destroy that institution. So yes, that is the statement that I received from the American Postal Workers Union. Now, again, that doesn't mean that there couldn't be bad employees in some places who might maliciously choose to misdirect mail, which is a crime in and of itself. But that was what I was told.
Yeah, can I comment?
Yeah.
Can I come? Yeah. So, yeah, we've been dealing with that a lot here in Georgia, and Andrew is absolutely right in terms of the official policy. What we also know, we've heard this from somebody that actually works in a post office in one of our rural counties, is that in their county, that they are not abiding by those rules. See, the challenge with this is when the U.S. Postal Office gives a policy or regulation, some of the same folks that are the actual folks that have to implement that, whether they're the folks doing delivery or whether they're the postmaster in the county, right, who is oftentimes linked up in the very same power structure in the county that has their foot on our necks to begin with. Sometimes there's a disconnect, right? And so to the point that Andrea just raised, yes, that's a violation of U.S. Postal Service policy. But what they bet on, what they rely on, is that information will never make it to the light of day. And so, so it puts us in a hard situation of having to tell people what the Postal Administration, Postal Service has said nationally, when in fact their reality and what they tell us is, I put it in my mailbox, it didn't have a stamp, I marked it for delivery, it's still in my mailbox because they're not picking it up. And so we're working on helping to expose this. There might be something within the next few days that you all may come across on this, but it's a challenge for folks to reveal, because again, it could be very different. Georgia has 159 counties, and it can be very different in each one of those counties.
All right, I am going to thank all of our speakers who did a totally awesome job. So I'm going to use my reaction button and I'm going to give them a hand clap. I know I've got your microphone silenced. And what I'm going to do is wrap this up by walking you through who our speakers will be tomorrow. And let's get that to work. I've got all these windows on my screen. I'll be there in just a moment. There it is. All right, and we want to go from the current slide. On Sunday, Gabby will be our moderator, and we will have Dolores Huerta of the Dolores Huerta Foundation. All right, now I'm going to say something that I probably shouldn't say. 44 years ago, when I was 12 years old, so yes, you have now just figured out my age. 44 years ago, oh good Lord, 54 years ago. Years ago, I had an incredible opportunity to take organizing training from the United Farm Workers of America. And that is where I got my first official organizing training. We will also have Sherilyn Eiffel of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. You are probably reading about various lawsuits that have been filed against various states for attempting to suppress the vote. In many instances, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund is one of the firms that are involved in that suit. We'll have Phaedra Jackson of Working America. Working America is the arm of labor that was designed to help organize people who are not labor union members, but who support workers and workers' solidarity. We will have Stephen Rosenfeld, who is with the Institute for Independent Media, who does a lot of writing on the state of voting and what is going on in the United States, as well as Thomas Sands of the Mexican American Legal Defense Education Fund. And yes, that's why we normally always write out MALDEF. So I'm going to do a really quick state of voting, which sort of helps ground people into why we do this work, all the organizations that spoke with you today and will speak with you tomorrow. There are 245 million age-eligible voters. 48 million of those voters are either inactive or they are deregistered, meaning they used to be registered and they have been removed from the rolls by their state boards of elections or their county registrars. 16.6 million of those voters are community of color voters. So those are our voters. And when we talk about voter suppression states, and the 6 states that I mentioned where we are working, throw in Florida, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, those states are also voter suppression states. What do they have in common? You can easily be deregistered for not voting. They have strict photo ID requirements. There is no same-day registration. There is no automatic voter registration. And the big one that we are seeing and expect to see more of in 2020, literally taking us right back to the 1960s, voter intimidation, physical voter intimidation, literally at the polls. So I wanted you to again see our postcards. I think they're beautiful. Vote for our lives. As I said, when we designed these postcards, we did not see COVID-19 and everything else that we have begun to see that wasn't even on our horizon. Vote your power. Our communities have a phenomenal amount of power. We have so much power that it is truly the goal of the other side to suppress our vote. And then the old-fashioned, you never get tired of it, from the 1960s and 70s, power to the people. And I'm going to slide past some of this. And this is the part where I'm going to ask you to get ready to join us. We are going to be rolling out a texting campaign that will be like nobody else has seen before. 4 of our states, Georgia, North Carolina, Texas, and Arizona, use voting centers. Voting centers are a great idea, but they're problematic because they change, they move, and people don't know where they are. So if you're on the wrong side of the digital divide by age or by the fact that you are rural, we have built in an automatic lookup of early voting locations, and you can see it in this slide, based on the voter's county and the voter's zip code. So all a voter needs to tell us is that they plan to early vote. We are encouraging them to vote by mail, but as I said, these voters are determined to stand up and fight back. So we give them information when we're texting. We automatically say, here's your closest early voting center. We just send that right back. So we have our new texting platform. We are making investments. So we really are looking for our younger folks in that 18 to 40 age range to have a tool that speaks directly to them, that can be part of their digital lives. It's called Motivote, and we will be rolling it out in our 6 states, where it asks people, check your registration, make a voting plan, and they get points for doing so. Cliff used it last year in a number of states. We have no idea what we're going to be looking like in November. But in the event there is such a thing as going to the polls on election day, we will be rolling out our Give a Ride app, where we have a dispatch tool to take people, to dispatch drivers to go and pick up voters. And I'm going to skip this slide. Cliff will recognize this. A social media campaign that we base on geofencing, where even though college students are not really in their classrooms, they're still attending classes, they're attending online. So we go to their web server and we find all the devices that are online. Remember, I said we're a technology company, and we can provide ads. There will be a very large series of ads. These are the ads that Cliff put together last year, where we will work to help these young voters really understand their power and their importance in this election and in these horrible times. We were very innocent last year when we put these ads together. The new ads in 2020 are going to look very, very different. And finally, we will again be building and using billboards, because Our rural voters are very, very critical. They have always been very critical to us at Center for Common Ground. We have always concentrated our outreach, and I know Cliff has too, in rural communities that normally get ignored by candidates, political parties, and pretty much everybody. So we will again be doing that. So in order to work with us and join us, and we ask you to join us tomorrow to get more information. It will be the same link. However, tomorrow we will begin at 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Central, 1 p.m. Mountain, and noon Pacific. If you want more information, at ROV at peopledemandingaction.org. If your organization is interested in Give a Ride, you can write me directly, Andrea at centerforcommonground.org. And to sign up to phone bank, we are currently phone banking in Georgia. We are going to be postcarding Mississippi and Texas, and we have new campaigns that will be starting for active voters. And we will be beginning a very limited texting campaign in the primary for Georgia and then Texas. You can sign up using our form at Action Network Forms, Reclaim Our Vote, sign up. So I am going to stop the share, and I am going to say it is 1:30 on the nose. Gabby, thank you for coming up with an idea to do that summit. I am going to thank all of our guest panelists. So thank you, Vanessa. Thank you, Cliff. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Sister Simone, for all the work you have done over all the years and all the amazing work that I know you will continue to do. And Gabby, I'm going to turn it over to you for the final goodbye.
Thank you to all of you for joining us. I hope this has been helpful. This is part of a larger series we hope to have last until September. We want to continue to provide you with as much state-of-the-art and state-of-the-moment information as we can. And tomorrow will be my turn to moderate, so I hope you'll join us. You saw the amazing cast of characters that will join us. We just believe in this. And for me personally, this is critically important. And I appreciate everything you're all doing, and I look forward to working with you in the future. And thank you, Andrea, for taking my crazy ideas and running with them.
And let me add a special thanks to Nancy and Suzanne.
Our team.
Yes, who worked so diligently getting all the background information and following up with our speakers. So thank you very much, Summit Organizing Team. And with that, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Have